Welcome to the Meeple Syrup Aftershow, designers discussing design. We're on episode 98, Cut All the Throats, or I like to think of throat punching. And we are on with Dylan and Sen and myself as we chat about a great episode we just had with Kurt and Jonathan Lavallee. Kurt Covert from Smirk and Dagger, and Jonathan Lavallee, a wonderful designer and writer who just recently at Gen Con came out with Jacuz, one of the great games from Smirk and Dagger. And we talked about Take That, some backstabbery, some ways to add some evil fun. So what do you guys think?
I could have listened to them all evening. It was really fun to hear. I mean, especially when we're talking about channeling different player types into different experiences with one another. I mean, that's really what the game is about.
Yeah, I really like the comments about funneling into a social contract, which is basically you accept the terms of engagement. If you don't like them, it's not the game for you. And there was some comment on a random board a while ago that says, if you design a game and the review says that it's not for all players, then it's not a good game. And I believe that's a lie. I believe that's really a bit of a lie.
Yeah.
That we all have preferences and we all have things we like and don't like. So saying that you're curating an experience for a certain type of psychographic, I think is exactly what you need to do. The answer to the question of, can I make a game great for all people, is yeah, you can, but that game's gonna suck. Right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you make a game for all people, you're kind of using the lowest common denominator. Anytime you do something really
extreme,
yeah, if you do something really well, and you really focus on that, you're going to have a specific audience. You're going to engage and have some people that love it and some people that will hate it.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's a good parable in the Book of Tea about that. Rikyū stating that he
would you like to tell us the parable?
I don't know if I can remember it from memory, but of course, one who appeals to the common taste is not a great tea master, but one who appeals only to his own highest taste is a great tea master. It was Rikyū.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a balancing point there, of course, where you say, how fine a point do we put on it when only, professional charlatans will want to play this game versus everybody who likes this style will want to play this game. I heard it on a great podcast. I listen to a lot of RPG podcasts in terms of design, just because it crosses over and it actually meets a lot of the social aspects of gaming better than the board game design podcasts. Board game design podcasts tend to be mathematical in nature more so, and then the RPG tends to be about social interaction, of course, right? And so one of the things that they were saying is you can make a game for, 10 people, and those 10 people will be your evangelists who will love that game, and hopefully 10 of their friends will buy that game and like it because they were evangelized to, and maybe 10 of those people's friends is about what you're going to get if you make such a focused game. If you want to make a game that is going to sort of have a longer lifespan and infect a bigger audience, you need to kind of aim for have a solid path. Like Kurt was saying, he said, this is what I want my company to do. From this broad spectrum of games, I'm going to take this semi-narrow way to do it, and I'm going to do that really well. And so that's branding, right? I mean, he branded Smirk and Dagger to be games that are by nature contentious, which is, if you know the brand, you've bought into the social contract, you've drunk the Kool-Aid, you signed on the dotted line, and you're okay with most of the stuff that's in, like kingmaking or backstabbing or player elimination. You know that somewhere in those games there's going to be those things. And so if you're one of those evangelists and spread those words out, then you're going to collect enough of the market to get it. But if you go too fine and you appeal to just one person, then you're going to have a very small market, right? So there's that fine balancing point.
I also really appreciated the discussion and debate about kingmaking. I like that we kind of had a little bit of a diversity of opinion while we talked about that, and I was curious, where do we stand on
Oh, Dylan, go
the
ahead,
idea
man.
of kingmaking?
Well, dude, the thing is, anything can happen. The more off the table the game is, the more different. Like kingmaking is something that can happen in any game with any meta element. I mean, like playing diplomacy, you'll have king. Playing almost any game, you can have king.
How did I know that diplomacy would get mentioned?
Well, it's the perfect example.
It is.
But the fact being that, like just what I was interested in was more just the fact that these, and what you were saying, Sen, the RPGs, all of the games that we're talking about right now are games where we're not on the table as much as we are like out here in the minds of the players. A pure Euro that's all math down here on the table. Okay, sure, there can be king making in the numbers down here. When we're talking about backstabbing, this is connivance. This is a completely different kind of experience. It's all king making, but it's a different kind of experience entirely.
That's a really good point. Like, so the when you said off the table, it's like, yes, that's exactly when king making makes sense. When you can't mathematically and deterministically figure that out,
Exactly.
it becomes a game. When it's not, when you can mathematically figure it out, it's no longer a game. It's an equation, and that's no fun. I don't like doing
mathematical
math.
choice. Yeah.
It is the best choice because of math. Whereas if you can switch that into the social realm, or at least push it that way a little more, maybe obfuscate some of the points, etc., or have reasons like in your hand. This is why I want to kill you specifically. Then we've got some, I think, that more game, that headspace game, where that's where it gets interesting. And that's, I think Kurt's point about building a story is really good. And I've had this argument with Daryl a lot. I would say that there are games that I don't like playing, but I have great memories of. I don't like mechanically, but I have great memories of because of the psychological impact that it had, the loss that I felt, or whatever, the highs and the lows of that game. Whereas most Euro games, I don't remember individual games as much as individual games of things like, very, very social games. And Daryl would argue that, he said, oh no, I've had very memorable games of Strasbourg or something. And he's like, yeah, I have. But my point is that
I can think of tournaments that I've been in, and I mean, to say a math game, for instance, I mean, poker to me is completely a math game with meta. So you could play it just for the math, or you could play it with a story. So, I mean,
right,
for
but
me,
you see, in both your stories though, there was skin in the game. You're in a tournament, or it's for money. Bluff,
or
et
for
cetera,
bragging
et
rights, or for, I mean, at the end of the day, even just a good story to be able to say you kicked your friend's butt. But
yeah, I just find it less in a Euro, more in other games. But
if I remember a long time ago playing Starfleet Battles and being in random dude's basement.
That would be a long time ago.
playing for the very first time, and I was playing Federation. The guy across the table from me looked at me and said, Kirk. And that was it for me, because I was absolutely toast, and it just so happens that my last name is Kirk. So that was the metagame, and I'll never forget that game, because he took 2 Klingon D7 battlecruisers and completely annihilated me as quickly as he possibly could. But like, the Starfleet Battles is a little calculating game where, like, if you've lost, you've lost. There's just it's almost as seriously mathematical as a Euro. Like, you're on the table.
Oh yeah, it's actually, I think it's even more so in a lot of ways.
Exactly. You're sitting there. The only thing is calculation, and like, you're dead. But it was that experience that made it, and all that experience was off the table. He killed me.
But I would argue that it's always off the table, and that you can always create that. You can always create an off the table meta to have a good time. It's just a matter of.
I think there's some players that are really good at it, like you, Daryl, and Jay are really good at doing that meta where you're like, hey, don't do that to me. Why would you do that to me? I just gave you this thing. Why would you? And mathematically, you didn't do anything spectacular, but you can socially manipulate the situation where you can get people to do things, right?
Whereas
and that's where I say naturally games are social, because you are doing them in person with each other.
Except that I think some games aren't.
No, and there are players who will play only the most optimal move, and they will get frustrated if you don't make the most optimal move, and that you don't take temporary alliances of convenience out of, because they're optimal at the time. Like, there are different types of players playing games, and I can name them, but yeah, there are some people who simply will play the math, and that's what they like. That's not what I like, but it's what they like.
But you're never going to play that social game with them anyways. So no matter what, you're just never really playing with them for that experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's it.
Yeah, and again, that's a social contract thing, right? It's if you are, especially if you're friends with people, and Daryl knows Jeff, so Jeff Temple, Daryl. So if you're playing with Jeff and you know him, it's very fine to do all the social stuff, and he'll get right in there and dig at you and whatnot. But if he's playing a game with like random people, he's very much, I just want to play my game, and I want to do the best at building this thing, and I don't want it to be knocked down. And that's kind of the way I see many Euro players in that vein, that it's only when they're in the right group that they kind of open themselves up. Whereas you're kind of the guy who would just kind of do that anytime, right? So
don't touch my player board. It's my player board.
I think exactly. I think there's a different experience going on, right? Like, because they really want to compare what they build at the end. Like, their interaction that they're really looking for is just at the end of the game.
Yeah, and Andy on the feed is saying, I think it depends on the spirit of the game and the spirit in which it's done, in that the people surrounding the game at the table dictate whether he personally likes Take That Cutthroat or not. And I agree totally. It is a social thing.
This is. I
mean, it's even the same. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just going to kind of bring in a slightly different example. Sure. When playing Super Motherload, for example, when you're saying about making that building that you're going to compare at the end, and you don't necessarily care whether you're win or lose, the great experiences in Super Motherload come out of chains and building those chains. So, like, of course, if you can give varying different types of players and a positive experience, that's awesome, wonderful. But yeah, there are all sorts of different types of experience. Creating a curated psychological experience off the board is so much more nuanced than creating a mathematical interaction on the board, like being able to build this cute little tower or whatever that you can.
No, exactly. I mean, and that's why I think all of us at this panel, like this table right now, are, even though we're separated by thousands of kilometers, will agree that none of us think a game is done when the math is done. We think the game is done when we can read the player's experience and it fits with what we kind of predicted it would be, right?
Yeah.
What are you looking at down there, Daryl? You keep looking to your left.
Oh, I'm just writing some notes of what you guys are saying.
No, I just wondered if you were I just wondered if you had something down there that from Nuremberg that we couldn't see.
Oh, the secrets.
I always write while I'm listening.
Cool.
So, yeah.
What did you see any games at Nuremberg that would lend themselves to more of the meta, more of the Take That, or that were purposefully elimination games that you can remember?
To be honest, it was actually kind of funny. I got labeled a bit of an American style designer while I was in Nuremberg, which I thought was hilarious because I think of myself as more like a hybrid Euro fan. But when pitching, a lot of publishers would say, yeah, I'm really interested to see how other European publishers will react, because we're more and more looking for this interaction while still, we like our points and our little, things that we build. So I would like to think that I'm a hybrid designer, but in the Nuremberg world, I was very much the American style.
Yeah, I can see that. I think most Canadians, by kind of just our nature of being, caught between the two monoliths of America and Europe, we tend to sort of go in the middle anyways. And I think most American designers are trending towards European stylistics as well in some way. But
and I think a lot of European designers are partnering up with American designers and seeing what kind of cooks up out of those kind of relationships. I mean, we've seen a bunch of examples, for instance, with Eric Lang partnering with a few different designers and seeing kind of what cooks up between them, where Eric's kind of scratching more of his Euro itch and they're kind of scratching more of their minis or cool extreme powers or things like that.
Definitely, we have to be able to find. I mean, speaking especially from a guy who's very interested in war games, we have to be able to find that focus that you find in Euros, where exactly the game is, where exactly the experience is, and being able to pull from both those worlds is absolutely superb. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of pure Euros, so there has to be that off the table aspect.
Mm-hmm. And there's,
Oh,
I think, go ahead.
it was interesting to see a lot of trends of like people making um, games. There was a lot of smaller games again, which I think is people craving, different stories and different experiences at the table, and instead of these long, that is a trend as well.
What game would you put on the table if you wanted to ruin friendships? No, I mean, have a night where it was, very much in that social contract that we are gonna be mean to each other tonight, and then be friends after it. What'd you put on the table, Dylan? I know you'd put diplomacy, but what else?
Of course, I put diplomacy. No, I mean, there's actually, to be honest, Victory 2's diplomacy mechanic is simply metagame. And when it's got 3 players, it can be bloody cutthroat, especially between a bunch of people who have played it before. It's basically a complicated type of Risk. It's a very good complicated type of Risk, but it's one of those games where the metagame was not provided for. It simply exists because of the board, and the players who are around the table are going to make that metagame.
So it's an emergent meta.
It's emergent meta, exactly. I mean, it's with 3 players, automatically, it's just going to be, how do I convince that guy to attack him and not me? That's it.
And that's the neat thing about, I mean, that is specifically cutthroat. Like when we get a 3-player scenario, we are in cutthroat mode.
Exactly.
And actually, it's funny because most of my absolute favorite games are 3-player games. And I don't know why. I actually really like cutthroat games. Not necessarily king making, not necessarily player elimination, but where you can play another person off of another person and you're in the middle. I find that fascinating. So even a game like, and one of my favorite games of all time, like Basari, that you can really only play as a 3-player game, that to me is a brilliant game in terms of mathematical balance, but also, and the use of roll and move in an interesting way, but also because you can totally manipulate people to do different behaviors based on math facts. Based on math facts, but yeah.
I want to raise one other thing is that I played a game of just I think it's called Minority. Like all it is a bunch of numbered cards. Everyone gets a numbered card, and that's the number of votes that you have in a government. And one person makes a proposal basically to cut a deal. Okay, you guys all vote for me, then we have a majority, bada bing. You present that to people, and they'll all be like, okay, well, where's the game? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. On the second round, they are screaming at each other because, no, you're not going to be part of my majority because you didn't vote for me last turn. You're an asshole, blah, blah, blah. Just piss off. Just a few cards with numbers on them can turn really, really meta really, really fast. So like, it's nice to kind of go down to those brass tacks and build a meta game just from those very simple mechanics.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that to me, there's 2 extremes. There's either the real cooked down, very interactive. I actually like when it's like about 6 players because you can almost have 2 of these 3-player loops where that's happening all the time. But those mixes, the triangles keep changing who's involved. But you can either have these quick games or there's some really longer games. I was thinking when you were talking, I was even thinking of Die Masher. And just like how the law changing and things like that become so significant because you're invested in these different alliances for changing laws and such like that. Lancaster's an example that does that in a quicker version of that. The game that I was going to point out that I really love when it comes to Cutthroat is Mall of Horror. And one of the
that is one of your favorite reasons.
It is. And one of my favorite aspects to that game is this constant level of survival, and it's like lifeboats as well. Of this, you're constantly group deciding to push someone out, but your alliances keep changing because ultimately you're just trying to survive, and the mechanic of knowing where the zombies are going with the surveillance cameras, and then being able to bluff or not bluff, all that kind of stuff is really, I think, really fun. And I take that. Bluffing with take that are great.
I've done that with Evo, like just with the what is it, the ability to see what the next season is. Just being able to totally bid people, like fake off people with bids to go to the wrong direction for. I mean, yeah, well, you can metagame anything. So like, maybe it's just the type of player. Who knows? It
kind of is. It was definitely a player that brings that experience to the table. That if you're getting in a game with that person, prepare to be metagamed, and that's okay. Nate's calling you out a little bit here. He says poker cannot be played for bragging rights, money or nothing. Says Nate Murray.
Well, I would agree for a real experience.
Yeah. Do not play poker with Nate. He'll take all your money. He'll take all your money. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff I think in this, and it's amazing how much I learned just from talking to people and listening to them about what their concepts of these things are. Because we get in such a closed mindset, I think, in game design. When we want to be successful, when we I gotta get a game out, I need to be published, etc., etc., and you listen to all these rules of thumb that say, hey, don't have player elimination, and don't have king making, and don't do this, and don't do that. And in essence, they're kind of right, but in the big scheme of things, I think everything can be included if you can, fit it in. And definitely mathematically, they're more right than the metagame part comes in as well, right, Dylan?
They worked historically. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to continue to hold.
Right, exactly. Like, I mean, the baggage of yesterday's designers is just their baggage. We can change some of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Daryl, do you have? Oh, there you are. Daryl, where are you next? Are you going to Toy Fair?
Yeah, I'll be at the New York Toy Fair. I'm just there for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Okay.
So that should be a lot of
Friday,
fun.
Saturday, Sunday, Monday. That's like 4 days of Toy Fair. Well, that's a big time.
It goes longer. It starts earlier and it goes longer.
So this is what Nate says, and this is actually true. If someone only plays the math in a game with interaction, they become exploitable as their moves are predictable.
Absolutely true.
Right. And that's it. Yeah. And it's funny because, I mean, this is kind of the way it is in most things in life. So just speaking from martial arts, if you go up against a newbie, like a total new guy, they do weird things because they don't know how to move their body.
Yeah.
But those weird things will often catch you off guard where you're going, oh my God, what the heck were they doing? And eventually you'll get over it because skill will beat that. But for the instant that they throw this weird punch or this weird move on you, it's like, what are you doing, and how do we get out of this? And so it's true. If you play only by poker engagement, you're bound to get red in a long game, right?
Actually, that really made me think, because like you look at a lot of Euros and basically here's my mathematical engine. All right, this works fine, and it's completely deterministic. How do I throw in a curveball to make this deterministic, generally working engine interesting to people? Either I have this amount of information, or I do this, or whatever. When you're curating an interpersonal experience, when you're curating metagame, that's where the uncertainty is, and that's where Nate's really got it nailed on the head. Is that that creates the interest in the game, that creates the tension, that creates everything that a cute little mathematical trick might do in a lot of Euros.
Right.
Yep.
And we often have that.
I think it's important. Oh.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, even like a Euro, like for myself, like when I was designing the walled city, the question that I constantly said to myself was, just because it's, there's a mathematical element, the chaos factor needs to be the players. You need to not be able to predict things, because the interaction is not fully prescribed. That you need other players so that you actually have to sit down and play the game. And until you play the game, you don't know what exactly is going to happen. You might have feelings or inclinations. There might be instincts involved. But at the end of the day, if you can make your game dependent on the players making the choices, then you're going to have a different experience every time.
And that's actually what really does make the game, right? Is the players at the table. Like Andy was saying, we've often I remember way back when Belfort was first coming out, somebody had got a hold of the pre-release of the rules and had just made all these like offhanded comments about, oh, this doesn't sound like it's for me, and blah 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 blah. And the thing they're missing is the interaction. That you're thinking from a very closed mindset, egocentric viewpoint, where it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can see how it's going to work because this is what I do. And the problem is when you think of, well, again, game theory, when you're thinking of perfectly rationally acting agents, yeah, you're right. You can predict every single move. The problem is that people are not perfectly rationally acting agents. Otherwise, Dylan would not have a job, right?
And as I've always brought up, is the iterated prisoner scenario. You can affect people's decision in the iterated prisoner scenario simply how you present the rules of the game, just by the terms you use to couch the game.
Yeah, for sure.
And like I said, the table shapes, the environment, everything, which is why, like, in a diplomacy game, when you can get everyone to dress up in suits and have champagne, that's the way to play the game.
Well, I mean, the champagne adds that extra.
It does.
But dressing up, I mean, so dressing up, Jesse and I talk about dressing up in the classroom a lot because the power dichotomy between student and teacher. And the same thing there, though. If you can get in a mode of thinking because you dress up, then your game experience is going to be quite different than if you don't think of yourself as being that role of a cutthroat negotiator who is looking out for the best interests of a whole country, right? That's different. You got that feels going, and you'll almost role play. And I think this is where Jonathan's real strength lies in terms of bringing in that role playing into the tabletop area. That makes it interesting and fun. And you know, some people might find it loud and obnoxious and not want to play Talisman near him, but in the long run, I think it makes for a really neat experience that isn't false and isn't faked and isn't put on. It's really, you know, this is enjoyable to that type of person, right? And that group of players is buying into this suspension of disbelief in order to have a better game experience where socially we contracted that we can, you know, be mean to each other, and that's cool.
Absolutely. I also want to just give a shout out for anyone who didn't see. While I was in Nuremberg, I saw a couple Game Artisan games. Head of Mousehold.
Yeah.
With from Adam Weiss. It looks awesome. And then also one that I managed to get home.
Oh, Josh is gonna be super jealous. Oh,
so Coco Nana,
which is not a real word. It's just a word.
It's just a made-up word.
Yeah, so that used to be River Runners that Josh made at the gathering like 2 years ago. He was like, I'm just gonna make this game. He made it. It's pretty fun.
Yep.
And so that's out from and Friends. And Head of the Mousehold is through Foxmind.
Foxmind.
Yeah, so some really great new games from Artisans coming out, and we'll have more on the way, right? Right? Good stuff. Any last words before we sign off the feed? We're at 4:40, so we went a little over, but whatever. We got Dylan back and Daryl's back.
Good.
So, oh, speaking of which, I have teaching circles next week, so I won't be here at all. Can you guys do that?
How do you even teach circles?
Well,
they just keep going around.
There are a lot of points. There are a lot of points to teach those circles.
That's true. Very Euclidean of you.
Yes, better than non-Euclidean, because then we'd be being eaten by, like, you know, squid monsters. So.
Or hounds of Tyndalos or something. Yes.
Yeah.
That's make sure to have some pie.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Pie is always good.
It's
So
completely
next week
irrational.
there will not be 3 of us. There will be maybe 1 or 2 of us, and that's okay. So do you guys have any last words? Any last thoughts on this topic? Daryl, you're all topicked out.
I regret nothing.
You regret nothing?
I have lots of swords in my back. That's all.
Nice. Well, that doesn't surprise me because Daryl is a player. If you ever get to play Daryl in a game live, don't be surprised if at the end of it you hate him and love him all at the same time.
That's what I go for.
He'll make your game experience better, but he might have done something
By
that you
making
didn't like.
Feel terrible.
Exactly, right? But your game will be better for it. Your game will be better for it.
It's a rite of passage.
It really is. Same thing with Jonathan or Jay or any of the guys who really get into the meta and the mind aspects of the game. Cool. So we're gonna sign off now. Daryl, give us a sign off.
Yeah, well, just again, thank you everyone for tuning in with us. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Twitter. You can find even our own website where it's the meepleshow.com.
Where I have to
feel
update.
free also to interact with us